Welcome to the Tuesday, December 8th, 2020 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County Health Order and with the Governor's Executive Order N2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, our meeting today will be conducted remotely. And in compliance with these orders, a physical location hasn't been provided for the meeting. The measures that we're taking will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. Our planning committee and also the legislative and human resources committee met this morning and will report out on under item 15, though a couple of their topics will be covered as part of our regular agenda as well. Madam Secretary, all directors including myself are participating via Zoom. Would you please call the roll?
Directors Coleman.
Present.
Katz.
Present.
Lenny.
Here.
McIntosh.
Here.
Mellon.
Present.
Patterson.
Present.
President Young.
I am here. Okay, will everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will now, we have one presentation, which Director Mellon will present from the Association of California Water Agencies. Frank?
Thank you. I attended ACWA's winter conference as both a participant, speaking with one group on the diversity issues facing water agencies and how to address them. But I also attended because we were given an award of the Hugo Hauser Best in Blue Award for achieving communications excellence. And the reason we got this award was for the excellent work that was done by our staff in the second half of 2019, where they launched this incredible information blitz regarding the PSPS. And as a result of that, we had a 21,000% increase in visits to our website and as much as 40% reduction in water usage. There was an impressive video that was shown, and I think now would be a good time for us to take a look and see just why we are so amazing an organization.
Hi, this is Kelly Zito, Public Affairs Director for the East Bay Municipal Utility District.
Sound.
In the second half of 2019, EBMUD faced an unprecedented challenge when PG&E and
Give us one moment.
Bless
Bless
you.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
You just passed the COVID test. You can sneeze well. While we're waiting for this to queue up, there were very impressive group of other organizations considered, and it, that we stood out really as a testament to the fine work that our staff does. And I'm sure we're going to queue up any moment now. I don't do card tricks, guys, sorry.
We're almost there.
No.
What's wrong? Okay.
If it's not kicking up, Risha, I don't want to hold our meeting up any longer than
No,
necessary. Okay.
we're gonna get to it. We have it.
Well, I know, I saw it.
We want you to hear it.
Yeah, Zoom is sometimes tricky with video, I've noticed.
All right, let's see. Okay.
Hi, this is Kelly Zito, Public Affairs Director for the East Bay Municipal Utility District. In the second half of 2019, EBMUD faced an unprecedented challenge when PG&E indicated that they would be shutting off power to large parts of our service area, which serves 1.4 million people in Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And we knew successful communications was going to play a big role in how we dealt with that response.
First, we needed our customers to understand the nexus between power and water. East Bay MUD relies on electrical power to operate our pumping plants, which push water up to the higher elevations. So to make that connection clear, we overlaid PG&E's outage maps with our water pressure zones and created a GIS map that displayed the affected areas. That way customers could search for their address and see if our calls for conservation applied to them.
Then, with backup generators in place at dozens of East Bay MUD facilities, we launched our public outreach program. We started that summer with media outreach and worked through the fall to inform our customers using continued media outreach and on-site interviews and publications, bill inserts, and social media. And throughout the process, we made sure to keep our own employees, our ambassadors, informed throughout.
Reaching all of the community was key. We worked directly with community leaders and elected officials to keep their communities updated. We also created fact sheets in English, Spanish, and Chinese.
We used social media and our website to share information that was constantly changing in real time. And we also used color-coded graphics on our social media that tied directly to our website to reinforce our messaging.
We sent hundreds of thousands of direct emails to customers throughout the outages. When the event hit, visits to our website increased a staggering 21,000% as customers checked them out.
The public got the message loud and clear. Customers in affected pressure zones used 40% less water than they otherwise would have.
As a team, we came together to develop new and innovative ways to reach out to our customers. And we deepened our connection with the community, namely by having their back and communicating early and often. This was a big win for EBMUD, and thank you, Aqua, for recognizing our efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think what particularly got me was not only the fabulous job that our staff did, but that closing picture showing the team that worked on it. Thank you, staff, for the amazing and wonderful job you did.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, with that award underway, that's a great video, and again, just great efforts. Fortunately, we have not had to deploy them to that extent this year so far. Thought we'd be through the PSPS period, but I guess we're not yet. There are no announcements from closed session. We'll now move on to public comment. If members of the public wish to speak on an agenda or a non-agenda item, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when that item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, your affiliation, if applicable, and the topic that you'll be addressing. The secretary will call each speaker in the order they're received, and each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes to speak, but I will have the discretion to amend this time if we have a lot of speakers. The secretary will keep track of the time and inform each speaker when their time allotted has concluded. Madam Secretary, do we have any members of the public who are wishing to speak?
We have 2 members of the public who wish to speak. We have Mr. Thies from the city of Orinda online. Mr. Thies, if you can unmute your phone, you will have 3 minutes and your time is starting now.
Thank you, President Young. I appreciate this item is actually on the agenda. I respectfully request that take my comments now. Unfortunately, I'm pretty packed for the rest of the afternoon. It's regarding the item number 12, which is the certification of the final EIR for the water treatment plant, which is located within the city of Orinda. We have been working with your agency quite a bit throughout the process. We recognize this is a major project for the Orinda water treatment plant in East EBMUD, and we want to be good partners with you guys on this project, given the length. For the most part, we wanted to express our appreciation for East EBMUD and their staff, addressing probably one of the major issues that were brought up by our residents and by the city regarding the placement of the staging area. That was moved from the residential street back into the water treatment plant, which is definitely appreciated by both the city and the residents. And this was one area that I think was more within your control than others. So thank you. I would like to just bring up 3 items that, you know, before you certify the EIR that Orinda would like to request is one, to continue to support the directors directing the East EBMUD staff to work with Orinda staff on these probably ongoing issues related mostly to noise, traffic, and pedestrian and just general safety around the job site, which I think we're all committed to doing. I'd like to highlight one item on noise, which was the need for construction, in particular, concrete trucks to begin deliveries and pouring concrete as early as 6 in the morning. This is an issue given, even though it's within the plant itself and there's probably a fair amount of distance, but noise travels pretty far, and there are homes, you know, just outside of the treatment plant all around all the sides. So our specific request is that those concrete deliveries be limited as much as possible, that if it's not required to have a complete whole day of concrete pours, that the portion which starts is after 8 a.m. That can still be completed in the same day. I recognize, you know, the construction related issues, so I respect that. And that if there are days that are needed for concrete pours before 8 a.m., that your community affairs staff person notify the city and the surrounding neighborhood of when those would occur. I think it would be helpful so we can at least convey that message. The other 2 items I wanted to highlight, which we actually sent a letter late last night that East EBMUD staff has, and hopefully the directors have now, you know, related to traffic. One is the truck traffic that is expected to exit the water treatment plant and utilize the Manzanita intersection at Camino Pablo. I understand you don't know the full scope of the project, but I think it is important that a signal intersection analysis be done at that location. We do know the rough number of trucks that are expected from this project, as identified in the EIR, which could be up to 18 per hour. that how it will affect that signal, given there's probably going to be more calls on the signal for left turns, more likely to get back onto Camino Pablo. That'll affect the mainline traffic along Camino Pablo, and also the cars that are coming out of the neighborhoods that feed into Manzanita, which is pretty significant. If that study is done, we can work with your agency to be able to adjust the timing of that signal for certain times of the day, or certain periods of time in the project to at least try to minimize the traffic impacts. So that's something we feel that can be done now or as earlier in the project as opposed to later. And our key is to make sure those elements are done before the project is bid out. A related item is we've recently repaved Camino Pablo this year and Manzanita Drive a year ago, and we both roads are in very good shape now. They were both rehabilitated with brand new asphalt, and we have concerns about the impact of the trucks. We recognize it is one portion of the entirety of this community and outside of the community's travel through here, but 10% increase in truck traffic can have some impact. We don't know if it will, but we'd like to be able to monitor that issue. And given typically these types of roads should go about 5 years and then need a resurfacing, we'd like to monitor the potential deterioration of those roads to see if there is any acceleration, which could be attributed to the 10% increase of the trucks. In particular, I would imagine the section north of Manzanita Drive will probably get less use given the typical traffic patterns as opposed to the area south of Manzanita Drive. And that's a good comparison. Both were paved this year and will have likely different traffic patterns because of the trucks turning back onto Camino Pablo heading south. So we would like EBMUD staff to at least recognize this possibility, and also for us to be able to take photographs and monitor pre-project and look at the situation as we're going through the project and also upon or near the completion of the project. So those are the main comments from the city of Orinda that I've been asked to convey. And we'd like the letter that we sent to you to be part of the public record. And if there are any further questions or you'd like to direct staff to work with us, I'm available. I'm the point person for this project for Orinda. And I appreciate everyone's time today, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for taking the time to share this. I do know that the letter that you sent yesterday was distributed to all board members, and we will, take this up when it comes up on our agenda, and just hopefully just a bit. So thank you for coming today, and have a good rest of 2020.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And then Risha, we had one more public speaker for public comment.
We actually have two. I have one more person online. I have Eric Larsen, and Eric, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. I would like to speak on items number 11 and 14, please.
Okay, so you'll speak when those items come up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we have one public speaker. We have Joey Smith, Local 2019. And your time is starting now.
Good afternoon, President Young, General Manager Chan, board members, and all staff. Thank you for your leadership in this very, I think the word of the year is unprecedented 2020. We have had many meetings as part of Local 2019. As president, I've been involved in many meetings. And everyone is working with earnest effort to get to win-wins, to make things work for the business end as well as for what's good for our employees. And we appreciate that. That was demonstrated today with something that was removed from the consent calendar, because we are very willing to work with senior management on items, and we are glad to collaborate. We have been, and we plan to continue doing that. On some of the items that are going to come up, I've had the privilege of working with in 11 as well as 14, as Eric is going to talk about later. But what I'd like to really say is I have not seen such great collaboration between senior management and the union in all of my years here, and I look forward to it continuing, especially as we are looking forward to potential negotiations. This is definitely a year that most of us are going to be glad to see gone, and we're looking for a better 2021. So thank you for working with us. We intend to continue to work with you.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate the sentiments. I think they're shared by many of us, or all of us probably. And that's it. Risha, no more public seekers for public comment?
There are no more speakers except for Mr. Larsen, who wants to speak on number
Right,
11 and
on
14.
the agenda.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay, so now, I just want to let folks know that the reason I'm not sharing my video is that I'm having some internet instability, and not showing my video tends to help that. So I'm mostly going to be a black square with my name speaking today, despite the new backgrounds, which I like. With that, let's move on to the consent calendar. We have 10 items. 10 items up for consideration. Unless any members want to pull an item for further discussion, I will take a motion.
Marguerite, this is John. I'll move 1 through 10.
Second.
Okay, we need a roll call vote.
Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson. Director Patterson. We're voting on the consent calendar, items 1 through 10.
Yes.
Thank you. President Young.
Yes. Okay, that concludes the consent calendar. We're now move on to determination and discussion. Item 11, Marlaigne Dum, and we'll hear the public comment following Marlaigne's presentation.
Hi, I am here and I'm getting an error message that my video cannot be started. So I apologize. I know you can't see me, but hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I hang on, let me try one thing here and see if I can get this fixed. One more try, and here I am.
Works. Yes, you are.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon. We have our 2021 state legislative initiatives before you today for consideration. And I'd like to take a minute to set the stage on how we arrived at the 8 that we have here today. Some of these I know that you've seen before in one form or another. To borrow Joey's word for the day, 2020 was unprecedented in challenges. And those challenges definitely were experienced by the state legislature. We saw a lot of things happening as a direct result of COVID, not least of which was a very serious budget challenge. And we also saw the legislature taking some extended recesses to deal with various COVID outbreaks. That left our governor on his own for a significant period of time with a lot of executive orders early on. And when the legislature came back, and also in recent comments, they've made it very clear how much they appreciated everything that the governor did to keep things moving and take quick action, while at the same time making it clear that they would like to co-govern with him moving forward on these emergency situations. That may inform how things happen over 2021. One of the things that we do think that we'll see is some additional efficiencies, and I put that in quotes, as we move into 2021. There are a lot of things that didn't happen last year, a lot of key priorities that the legislature did not get to because they simply ran out of time. So we see some carryover topics, like housing as an example that we'll talk about in a minute. But in terms of the efficiencies, what I am really getting at is operational efficiencies for the legislature. Last year, what happened was we went to single policy committee referrals for policy bills. That made the burden to get a policy bill through higher. I know that sounds like it would be lower because it's a single referral, but we also had policy committees really overwhelmed. They were reduced in the number of times that they met. They were having to deal with remote testimony. Their hearings were naturally much longer than we'd seen in the past. And so it made it difficult for big picture policy initiatives to get through, particularly if they were not initiatives that the administration and both houses agreed on. No access to the Capitol was another piece for outside people like myself and our team in Sacramento, but also for a lot of the Capitol staffers. A lot of the offices were down to one staff person. It made it very difficult for offices to get work done. That meant very difficult for members to move bills and to deal with their sponsors in getting bills through. So with all of that, we see multiple priorities moving forward into 2021 and challenges that we don't quite know what they're going to be yet because the legislature hasn't determined how it's going to do business. Before I get into the initiatives, one last thing I want to say is these initiatives are not the comprehensive list. What these are the items that we see as key priority issues for the legislature that have that nexus to district operations and policies. We still, like every other year, review every bill that comes out. We still stay very actively engaged. And so if things change, we will come back to you. We'll come back to you with bills for positions like we always do. And if there's something really drastic, we'll be right back with you. And that being a focus area that we would add. So with that, our 8 policy initiatives before you today. The first one is board quorum. This was something that we started with last year. And the idea is in the event of an emergency, and take yourself back to January before COVID, in the event of an emergency, when board members cannot get back into the service area, we needed the ability for the board to function remotely and declare or ratify an emergency. And what I shared this morning with Leg HR, when we floated the idea last year to make that statutory change, what we got was no traction. We got a lot of people saying, that's never gonna happen. People not listening. Then COVID hit and here we are. So with this board quorum idea, what we're hearing at the local government level, so this is cities, counties, special districts, is a desire to codify some of what was in the governor's executive orders on the Brown Act and codifying things in a way so that if there's an emergency, that folks don't have to wait for the governor to act, but they can go straight to those statutory provisions. We expect to see any effort to be very narrow because there's this balance with transparency as well. But our proposal here is that we would continue to discuss this board quorum concept in the context of these broader discussions on the Brown Act. The next one we have is climate change. And by the way, these are all in alphabetical order. Climate change is something that we have paid attention to, focused on over the past several years in the context of other initiatives. But now we are looking at it at its own initiative. Most notably, as we look at bonds. Last year, the bonds that were before the legislature that the administration proposed and also that were going to be on the ballot by signature were climate bonds, not the traditional resource bond or water bond. And we are expecting those conversations to happen this year. As you know, there was no climate bond on the ballot, but climate in its own is a stated priority of both the Assembly and the administration. Plus, we see the Senate wants to continue the climate bond conversations. The governor issued 2 executive orders in the fall that we anticipate the potential for some implementing legislation. And we as a district have our own ambitious climate goals that we would like to share and see state policy reflect what East Bay MUD is doing. So that's our climate initiative. Next one is forest health and wildfire prevention. This could arguably be under the climate category. There's a strong intersection here. What made us put this as a separate is twofold. One is the PSPS issue and the idea of potentially getting funding for PSPS events to help cover costs. That was something that was talked about and wasn't successful last year. But also the idea of funding, particularly for wildfire preparedness. And this is something that we look at specifically for East Bay MUD, but also in our role with UMRA. Number 4 is housing fees. Housing has been a stated priority for both houses of the legislature and the administration. The concept of increasing the number of housing units in the state and lowering housing cost has been something that the legislature has been talking about for several years. There was a big push last year, and some of the key packages just didn't make it across the finish line. They simply ran out of time at the last week of session. The issue of fees tends to be focused on the idea of mitigation fees. And depending on who you talk to in the Capitol, system capacity charges and connection fees for water and wastewater are part of mitigation fee conversations. Some folks say they're not. There have been efforts in prior years to limit or restrict, eliminate the ability to impose those fees. We have worked through our associations to push that back, but the fee conversations are continuing. We expect them to continue into 2021 and beyond. And the focus on system capacity charges and connection fees is increasing. So we'd like to engage more directly on that topic to protect East Bay MUD's ability and authority to continue to impose those fees in a fair manner. Next one, number 5, is low-income ratepayer assistance. This is specific to the AB 401 report that the State Water Board provided to the governor earlier this year. And the idea is to get a program established that will provide a mechanism for low-income ratepayer assistance statewide. The initial proposal a few years ago was to come up with a state program, scrap all the local programs, but the price tag was $600 to $700 million a year for that program. Given what's happened last year with the budget and what we see happening this next year with the budget in terms of really dealing with COVID. We're still in COVID. We're in the middle of a pretty big outbreak right now. And then they're going to move over to COVID vaccination conversations. There's still a push on budget. So the conversations are continuing, but they tend to be, what can the state do short of that big price tag to provide this assistance. And this is an area where EBMUD can provide a positive example. So we are suggesting that we continue in these conversations. Number 6 is racial equity and justice. And this one is really looking at a couple things. The main issue is Prop 16 was not successful before the voters. And it is clear from comments that the legislative leadership have made that they would like to see what can be done to further the goals of Prop 16, short of pursuing another constitutional amendment. Are there things they can do at the statutory level? And as you know, EBMUD You Board took a support position on both Prop 16 and the underlying legislation. And we would like to engage in the conversations to the extent that there's a nexus to the district operations and policies. The other piece is the resolution that you adopted last June on racial equity and justice. And we'd also be looking for nexus to that resolution and ways that we can further EBMUD's goals legislatively. Number 7 is wastewater discharge prohibition. This is a repeat hit. This is one you've seen before. Senator Hertzberg had an opinion piece in the San Francisco Chronicle about a month ago, talking about his efforts to prohibit wastewater discharge. We are proactively reaching out to the office with other stakeholders and with the senator to find out what his plans are legislatively for this. But we want to be prepared. And so we are including this as a legislative initiative. You may recall when we brought the prior measures to the board a few years ago that we were looking at a very steep price tag in the and not being able to comply. So even trying to comply, our starting cost was around $8 billion. And then number 8 is water supply and reliability. And this is one that we bring every year, as long as the State Water Board is talking about water rights issues, as long as the Water Quality Control Plan update is in process, voluntary agreements are being talked about, and there's a water resilience portfolio. We would be proposing to continue our engagement at the legislative level to protect and promote EBMUD's interests. Are there any questions, any comments?
Why don't we go ahead and take Eric's public comment, and then we'll have comments and questions from board members. Eric or Risha, when you're ready.
Eric, your time is starting now.
Young. Thank you, President Young. Thank you, Risha, General Manager and Directors. AFSCME 444 does request that EBMUD work to lobby the state to assure that frontline essential workers who operate and maintain critical infrastructure are high on the list for COVID vaccinations as soon as available in the state. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Questions from or comments from board members?
Marguerite, this is John. We did hear this morning in the Ledge HR committee, and we all three of us agreed to support the 8 principles. One of them on the Forest Health, number 3, Marlaigne indicated, and Richard Sykes, who is Executive Director of UMRO, will get all that information so UMRO, if appropriate, can take action. And actually, as I look at this, number 8, water supply and reliability, there may be times when we're looking at some of our issues of what our interests on the McCollum are also the interests of those up country. And so we need to look at that as well for what Richard can take to UMRA in addition to.
Okay. Other board members? I've got a couple things I want to bring up, but let others go first. Andy?
Thank you. I'd like to comment. First, I find the list very comprehensive and observe that there's a lot going on and appreciate the preview for the board of directors. Thank you for your work in investigating those issues. I have some somewhat detailed comments on two issues. On climate change, I think that we should be incorporating workforce development and the just transition into the climate change conversation. They are part of the broader conversation, and we should be prepared to engage in already existing conversations from the perspective as a public works employer. My second comment is about the housing item, and second units on single family lots are very important to the planning of our local communities. And at the same time, we have to recover our costs. We've done some work on this issue at a recent workshop, and that work will be continuing through this budget cycle. But it did seem like we had some unfinished work on the second units issue. I would recommend that we do some internal work and have some time scheduled for an adequate conversation so that the board can compare some of the issues that the legislature might be considering alongside our own service capacity charge review, so that we can compare these issues with the practical perception of homeowners that they've already paid for capacity with the, in light of the smaller incremental water use of a second unit on a lot, but also our own accounting of whether a property owner indeed has actually paid for the capacity compared to what a typical second unit addition is. So those are some pretty important and detailed issues that the board could benefit from reviewing before the legislature really gets rolling on this. I don't have a concept to react to on the larger multifamily side, but for these second units, I think they do run into some important issues for the board to consider, and sometimes the legislature considers these too. And I think we should be encouraging second units and removing unnecessary barriers, but we also need to be recovering our costs. So I think we need some staff assistance to help the board comment about that further. Lastly, I would agree with the public comment that COVID-related relief is important for our workforce and our whole operations, and would request that we monitor administrative and legislative activities at the state and federal level. And so I would make those comments, and thank you for the presentation.
Okay, anyone else? So I've got a couple things. One, I want to second Andy's remarks around transition, and specifically around opportunities for us. I've raised this with Clifford previously. I'm not sure I've raised it in the board context, but a plumber is a plumber. And much of the workforce that is impacted by the decline of over time of fossil fuels could be transition. We could end up getting a win-win in terms of meaning the water industry as a whole, in terms of rebuilding and rehabilitating our infrastructure, that many of the jobs that are had by those in the fossil fuel industry could be transitioned into a public works area to support water infrastructure rehabilitation. So I'm definitely want to make sure that we're engaged in that discussion. I hope that on the water affordability discussion, that we can link in the human right to water and what the action that we're proposing to take later this afternoon, and spreading that idea and concept into that conversation. And then my final comment is a question. Just not one of our priorities, but it is an issue that is emerging of sort of increasing concern, which is the ubiquitous use of polyfluorinated chemicals, or PFAS, and what role I believe there's been some discussions, but Marlaigne, if you could update us on PFAS and how East Bay Mud might engage in helping to prevent PFAS contamination, since wastewater is a contributor.
Absolutely.
Oh, and I would like to also agree that we should be tracking COVID and figuring out how to get our people protected.
Okay, so let me make notes here. So if I forget something, please remind me. I'm going to start with PFAS and work backwards. On the PFAS, we're looking at that both at a state and a federal level. And I want to start with the federal side because there's very possibly going to be some action at the federal level, particularly with the new administration coming in. I know EPA has got a workforce. We should see a different approach from EPA starting maybe late January time. And also some executive orders early next year that may or may not address this issue. But certainly at the federal level, when we get into things like pollution prevention, how do we reduce the use or eliminate the use? Something happening at the federal level is going to be more beneficial because then we get a more uniform approach and industry sort of has to do it. Looking at the state level, what we looked at last year is what initiatives are out there to go to that reduce or eliminate the use. And you may recall that Senator Allen had a bill on the fire retardants, and it was eliminating the use of PFAS in some fire retardants. We took a support position on that one, and we were expecting to see more happen this next year. And then we got a surprise, and this is on the labeling topic. And one of the concepts that has come up is, what about labeling products for PFAS so consumers can make a decision? And there was a bill last year on the flushable wipes, on labeling flushable wipes. It's something that CASA has been working on for years. And they worked with industry and finally got an agreement. And placeholder there, that agreement isn't there with industry on PFAS yet. But on flushable wipes, it is. So they had this bill that was no opposition, non-controversial, and it failed last year. And it failed last year largely because of the COVID situation. And it was viewed as just far enough outside the priorities and the time frame that they had that it didn't go anywhere. And so at the state level, we're expecting a little bit of a pause on the PFAS type conversations from a policy perspective, but more activity at the federal level. If that changes, we would come back to you with specific proposals at the state level, but that's what we're seeing right now.
Thanks.
Does that answer that question before I keep moving?
Yeah, I think there's some delay on my audio.
Okay.
So that's why it's sounding like I'm not responding as quickly as I usually do.
Okay. Okay. On the COVID relief, yeah, we absolutely will continue to monitor the relief efforts. We'll be talking about our federal initiatives in January. And at risk of getting ahead here, I've got a state and federal update for you also that's outside of the initiatives. But at the federal level, you recall there was COVID relief that happened up through May of this year, and then it stalled. They kept talking about a new package, and the House wanted a lot more than the Senate was willing to give, and then the White House didn't want anything, and then they did, and the drama has continued. Right now, we're looking at potentially another COVID relief package at the federal level of about $900 billion. They're trying to get something done in the last few weeks of this Congress, which is basically between now and the end of the year, that would be less than what the House would like to see, less than what Speaker Pelosi wants to see. But the idea is that when the new administration comes in, maybe following with another package. So I expect the COVID relief topic to continue at the federal level for some time. At the state level, yeah, I think we're going to see more effort at the state level. We may see more executive orders. We may see legislative action or a combination. We would absolutely stay engaged on those. On the vaccination piece, that is something I think Dave has a bit of an update for you on that with the COVID update later today. We know that the state is working on their vaccination plans that they have to submit to the feds. I know they've got another one due this week. Water, wastewater utility workers are considered in the frontline worker category. They're not at the same level as healthcare workers, but they are considered a frontline worker. On housing, let's do housing and then I'll go to the workforce transition. On housing, just so everybody knows, on the separate unit, on the ADU or accessory dwelling unit, in-law flats, whatever you want to call those, that issue may be largely decided already by statute that came out a few years ago. And there's some formulas on what to do with system capacity charges and connection fees. The conversation that we expect to see now is more broadly on the general authority of a utility to impose the fees and the size of those fees. So it's a little bit bigger than the separate dwelling unit fee or the accessory dwelling unit concept. So what we have seen is really the tension is it part of a mitigation fee or not? And can you charge it or not? If you can charge it, can you be reined in by having some set parameters on what you can and can't charge? It's sort of at that bigger level is what those conversations, and we will absolutely be coming back as we have detail on those conversations. Lastly, on the climate workforce transition issue, absolutely we will put that in with our climate initiative. That was part of the Green New Deal that Assemblymember Bonta had introduced earlier. This feels like 10 years ago, but earlier in 2020. And then because of COVID, it stalled out a little bit. But that is a conversation that we were having with his office, and we would like to refresh that conversation.
Great. Okay.
Oh,
Anybody else?
I'll move the 8 recommendations that have been put forth.
I'll second.
Ready for your roll call
Seeing
vote?
no discussion, I think so.
Okay. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson. Did we lose him? Oh, there he is. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes. Yes.
All right. President Young.
Yes.
would you like a quick federal update on lame duck?
Sure.
Okay.
And lame duck and cabinet or other, yes.
What's happening? Yes. Okay. So lame duck is what happens between now and when the new Congress is sworn in early January. And the things that we're really focused on right now, one is spending. The continuing resolution that is in place right now expires on December 11th, and Congress is still working on a spending package. If they can get an agreement on all 12 spending bills, plus a COVID relief package, they'll do some sort of big omnibus thing. What is equally possible is that we see some sort of continuing resolution to take us a little bit further down the road so they can get agreement on spending bills. With regard to the COVID relief package that is being talked about, I mentioned a minute ago, we're looking at about $900 billion. the categories, and I'm going to give you the caveat here. This could all change as negotiations go, but right now, this is what's being talked about. $908 billion, $160 billion for state and local government assistance, $180 billion for unemployment assistance, $288 billion for small business, $82 billion for schools, $45 billion for transportation. What's not in there is low-income assistance. That was something that was part of every conversation up until a few weeks ago. The hope is that if another package materializes under the new administration, that low-income assistance would then be inserted into that package. We're still pushing for it, but it's not part of this very narrow package that they're talking about now. Another item that we have been focused on, we always focus on this one during the lame duck, or at least in the last few years, is the reauthorization of the WIN Act. A blanket reauthorization of that act has the potential to harm a fishery because of the Delta Cross Channel Gate issue. Right now, it looks like a reauthorization is off the table for lame duck. We're still watching, we're still engaged, we're still talking about it, but we feel very prepared to deal with it if it crops up again. WRDA, it looks like WRDA may pass out during lame duck, a very narrow WRDA focused only on core functions and not spreading out into water resource issues. Clean Water for All Act was something that we talked about a few months ago, and just an update on this in terms of co-authors. Representative Lee is now a co-author of that measure. DeSaulnier has been a co-author, and Representative Swalwell has indicated that he would review it again next year if it is reintroduced next year. And then last on the lame duck topics, there was a letter on a forest health issue that Director Coleman asked about during Leg HR. There's a push to have some projects pushed forward as a bill under lame duck, kind of a pilot approach that would require a NEPA waiver to do some forest health projects. What we're hearing is it is not broadly supported by the environmental community, and it is likely not to move this year. If we see anything on forest health this year, it would be narrowly focused on the issue of tree planting. And on the cabinet, I think probably the biggest news is Attorney General Becerra has been appointed, or will be nominated, I should say, to be Health and Human Services Secretary at the federal level. That increases the game of musical chairs that we may see at the state level. Governor Newsom does have an appointment to make when Senator Harris vacates her seat to be vice president. There's a lag between when Congress is sworn in early January and when the president and vice president are sworn in on the 20th. And so Senator Harris, we're not sure yet, but she may hold on to her seat and resign closer to being sworn in as vice president, depending on what happens with the Georgia elections and the balance of the Senate and how the Senate leadership race pans out. A little inside baseball. Now, Governor Newsom also is going to need to appoint a replacement for Becerra. And depending on those replacements for Harris and Becerra, there may be some other appointments that need to be made to backfill those seats, or we may have to have special elections. We don't have a clear indicator yet who he's going to want to appoint to fill those seats.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Thank you, Marlaigne. I think you have a busy year ahead of you.
I think so. I think we'll be talking a lot. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I appreciate it.
At least they're no longer talking about Becerra for the filling Harris's seat.
Right. That only leaves 19 people left.
Narrows it down.
Okay, so that's our legislative update. We're going to move on to item 12, which is the EIR for the final supplemental EIR for the Orinda water treatment plant. And there are 4 actions that we need to take. Craig, I mean, we're going to have a presentation from Chen Wang, but when we get to the action items, can we take them as a lump or do they need to be taken individually?
I would prefer you take them individually.
Okay.
One at a time, thanks.
All right. So presentation.
Yeah, and we'll have Jimmy Aloye, Director of Engineering Construction. He'll introduce this presentation before Chen starts the presentation.
Okay.
So good afternoon, President Young and members of the board. We are at the culmination of the CEQA process for the Orinda filter plant UV disinfection project. And it has been a long road. I know Director McIntosh at the planning committee meeting this morning indicated that she's heard a lot about this. And so we hope that this will be a good ending to the CEQA process. Chen Wang of our Water Distribution Planning Division will actually make the presentation. So I will leave it up to her. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy, and thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon, President Young, directors. So today I'll be providing you an update on the Orinda Water Treatment Plant Disinfection Improvements Project, as well as its final Supplemental Environmental Impact Report, or SEIR. So in the interest of bandwidth, I'm going to shut off my video, but I'll turn it back on at the end of the presentation. Sorry, I am missing the button to do that. Let me try. Risha, do you have the power to turn off my video?
Yes, hold on.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. There you go.
Great. So if you could help me move the slides forward too, I would appreciate that. Should have asked you that a bit earlier.
You actually have control of the slides if you want to go ahead.
Oh, I do.
You do.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And if your mouse isn't working, try your keyboard arrows.
Okay, here we go.
There you go.
There we go. It's working with my keys. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So to continue, the project will improve disinfection reliability to continue to meet water quality regulations and to better protect public health by adding a multi-barrier treatment process, in this case, ultraviolet or UV and chlorine disinfection. This project will also reduce the formation of disinfection byproducts, such as trihalomethanes, by changing our process at the Orinda water treatment plant to chlorine treatment after organics have been filtered out. The project will make the Orinda water treatment plant more adaptive to changes in source water quality, which we anticipate will continue due to warming climates, fires in the watershed, and future droughts. So the project is located, as you are probably all well aware and familiar with, at the Orinda water treatment plant off of Camino Pablo, north of Highway 24 in Orinda. So here's a site plan that shows the project components. You have Camino Pablo running diagonally across the screen and Manzanita Drive near the top left. The existing maintenance building, shown in red, will be demolished and its use is incorporated into a new 2-story maintenance and UV electrical building, which we call the MAUV building, and a new grounds maintenance building closer to Manzanita Drive with associated parking. The 3 underground components are called out in darker orange and are the UV disinfection structure and the chlorine contact basin, as well as the effluent weir structure, which will convey the treated drinking water to customers. There will also be several other outbuildings constructed as part of this project. You have a new power building for the Los Altos pumping plant #2. You have the south electrical building, which will be constructed to power the new facility. And you will also have a new diesel generator, including 2 fuel tanks, which will be installed near the south end of the water treatment plant site to back up facilities during a power outage. So for the results of our draft SEIR analysis, we have 2 resource areas shown on the left, energy and recreation, which were found to have less than significant impacts, requiring no mitigation. We have 4 resource areas shown in the middle column, which were found to be less than significant with adopted WIDIP mitigation measures. This means that WIDIP mitigation measures adopted in 2006 for Orinda water treatment projects that have been incorporated into our project reduce potential impacts to less than significant. We also have in the orange column 8 resource areas that require new mitigation measures to reduce potential impacts to less than significant. These include new project-specific mitigation measures or revised WIDIP mitigation measures. The draft supplemental EIR did not identify any significant and unavoidable impacts. For our public outreach for the draft SEIR, over 1,000 notices of availability and meeting postcards were sent to residents and responsible agencies. The notices were also published in the Contra Costa Times and in the City of Orinda's Outlook. A virtual public meeting was held to discuss the draft SEIR and its findings on August 20th of this year. This was during the draft SEIR public review period. A total of 9 comments, comment letters, emails, and other submittals containing 29 individual comments were submitted during the draft SEIR comment period by the City of Orinda and 8 city residents. In addition, 6 verbal comments were recorded during the community meeting. So key comments on the draft SEIR included the visual character of the project buildings, the timing of when the perimeter landscaping would be done. Typically, landscaping is completed near the end of construction. In response to community concerns, landscaping is being phased closer to the beginning of the construction period to allow plantings to grow during construction. Comments also included concerns about the project's proximity to San Pablo Creek and its adjacent riparian habitat, specifically the location of the proposed Manzanita East staging area across San Pablo Creek from the Orinda water treatment plant. There are also comments on construction traffic, noise and dust, hours of construction, and the construction staging areas. The city also commented on the monitoring of roadway pavement conditions. For the final SEIR, there were no substantial changes to the draft SEIR. So in a previous slide, I had mentioned the Manzanita East project staging area. But in response to city and community concerns, the Manzanita East staging area was removed from the project and relocated to the Settling Pond staging area. You can see detail on the bottom of this slide of what part of the Settling Pond staging area will be used. The Settling Pond staging area is further away from residential uses and well screened by existing vegetation. As discussed in the final SEIR, this minor modification of the project will not cause any new significant environmental impacts or a substantial increase in the severity of previously identified project impacts. For schedule and next steps, the draft and final SEIR were both completed in July through November of this year. The next steps include board action on the final SEIR before the board this afternoon. Design will be completed in 2021 with construction from 2022 through 2026. And also, as mentioned in the Planning Committee meeting this morning and by City of Orinda Director of Public Works Larry Thies earlier during the comment period, this staff did receive a letter from the City of Orinda last night at about 9:30 p.m. commenting on the district's responses to Orinda's draft SEI comments. The Secretary's office provided each board member a copy of the letter, as President Young mentioned. So since receiving the letter, staff has reviewed the letter and concluded that it largely repeats some of the city's draft SEI comments related to traffic, noise, and biology, and that those comments were adequately addressed in the final SEIR response to comments provided to the city on November 19th. Specifically, the letter reiterates comments on potential impacts to the riparian habitat along San Pablo Creek, special status plants, permitting, noise related to construction traffic, preparation of a traffic control plan, and potential pavement concerns along Camino Pablo. The final SEIR adequately addressed all of the city's comments and includes key mitigation measures to reduce all impacts to less than significant, specifically requiring East Bay MUD to obtain necessary permits for work within the riparian corridor, implementation of a 5-year riparian vegetation mitigation and monitoring program, preparation of a special status plant survey by a qualified biologist, and preparation of a detailed traffic control plan. The city's letter acknowledges that the final SEIR identified all environmental impacts as either less than significant or less than significant with mitigation, but still requests that district staff continue to work with the city on the identified issues. District staff is committed to continue to coordinate with the city on the project and on other ongoing East Bay MUD efforts to improve water infrastructure within the city.
Jim, Frank Mellon here.
Yes.
So, you know, I read that letter and then I've listened to what you've done so far.
Yes.
Was there any warning from the city that they were going to do this 11th hour letter?
I think.
Can I jump in here, Frank?
Sure. Yes, please.
I asked Larry to come and speak to the board today, in part because the letter was received yesterday, but the comments that they have made are not, as Chen mentioned, are not different than comments that have been raised throughout, and what I hope and believe will be the case, and want to get Chen and Jimmy's commitment to, is that you know, that the issues will be, that we will continue to work on these issues together so that all parties are you know, satisfied to the extent that they can. We've put a great deal of effort into, I mean, as everyone here knows, Orinda is literally the heart of the district's operations.
Right.
Because of San Pablo Reservoir, because of Orinda Treatment Plant, you know, et cetera, and our maintaining our, you know, good relations with the community and the city are extremely important, and we've put a lot of effort into improving that over the last several years, and expect that this is a huge project that is going to have it is going to have an impact on the community of Orinda. It's going to be 4 years in construction. There will be a lot of earth being moved, you know, a lot of trucks, et cetera. And so I just think being super sensitive to, you know, the request of the city to be a partner in this is critical. So I don't think of it as 11th hour. I think they're just basically continuing to say, we're here, we care about these issues, we're going to continue to care about these issues. So I'll stop there.
I'll defer to you on that, Marguerite. Thank you.
Jimmy, did you want to weigh in?
Sure. I wasn't sure if there were other comments coming, but yes, as the board is aware, we have been working cooperatively with the city of Orinda on this specific project and all of the projects that we have in the city of within the city of Orinda. Dave Renstrom, our manager of water distribution planning, has had ongoing regular quarterly meetings with the city at which a variety of topics are raised and discussed, including this project, and we continue to address them. And we are committed to continuing that level of involvement and cooperation with the city as we move forward.
Thanks. Any other board member comments or questions?
President Young, I do have one more slide in the presentation, but I can wait for comments.
Okay.
If there are any other comments, of
Okay,
course, I can
go
take
for it.
them. It's just the final one. These are our recommended actions for today for this item, which include certifying the final SEIR for the Orinda Water Treatment Plant project, make findings in accordance with CEQA, adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan in accordance with CEQA, and to approve the Orinda Water Treatment Plant Disinfection Improvements Project.
Okay, are there
Marguerite,
any further
so
questions?
no, but I do move staff's recommendation.
Second. I'm under the
Okay,
impression.
do you want to, each one has to be moved separately, Lisa?
Oh, all right. Oh, wait, make sure I.
We have
off
to do
mute.
each separate.
All right, then I move to certify the final supplemental EIR.
Second.
So the first 12A is to,
That's 12A, Marguerite.
yeah, I know, it's the time delay in my Zoom.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. So moved.
Ready for the roll call vote for 12A?
Yes.
Right. Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director Lenny, Director Lenny, are you there?
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes.
Okay. And item 12B,
I move 12B, which is to make findings in accordance with CEQA pursuant to staff recommendation.
okay. We have it moved by Director McIntosh and seconded by Director Patterson. Roll call vote, Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes.
I also move to 12C to adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan in accordance with CEQA.
Okay. Properly moved by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Patterson. Roll call vote for item 12C. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz,
Yes.
Lenny,
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes.
And finally, 12D, I move to approve the project.
Second.
Moved by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Patterson. Item 12D, roll call vote. Directors Coleman,
Yes.
Katz, Lenny,
Yes.
Yes.
McIntosh,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
President Young.
Yes.
Yay.
Okay. Moving right along. Sort of. Item 13 will be presented by Andrew Lee, Manager of Customer and Community Services. Andrew?
Yeah, good afternoon, board members. And for your consideration today is a resolution authorizing the use of flow restrictors as an alternative to water shutoffs. And I'm going to be asking Janetta to help me advance the slides. I do have a very short presentation for the board this afternoon. I don't see the presentation yet.
It's coming.
There we go.
And give us one moment, please.
All right.
Andrew, you can see the slides. We're going to get it into presentation.
If you can
mode.
move this, yeah, you can go to slide number 2, so I can just go along with the.
We're trying to go into presentation mode. Give us one moment.
Sure.
So can you just advance the slides in this mode?
That's because you're in the PDF.
Right.
This is just fine. I can just go through them just with this format here. It's just fine. So we had several opportunities to discuss with the board on this topic, and we received a lot of great feedback from the board, which was incorporated in subsequent discussions. And on November 24th, the board agreed to move forward with using the flow restrictor device as an alternative to address delinquencies. So as such, we are bringing back a resolution for your consideration today. Slide number 3, please. So the next couple slides is just going to summarize the resolution and some of the key principles. And those principles include to recognize human right to water. COVID-19 have underscored the importance of water. Shut off disproportionately affect our low-income customers in disadvantaged communities, and ensure the compliance of Prop 218, and express our intent to pursue a more progressive alternative to address delinquencies other than using shutoffs. And slide number 4. So furthermore, the resolution that you will see will direct staff to review and amend the district's regulations, policies, and other procedures to ensure that customer support programs are comprehensive to help our customers, and we are making every effort to reach out to customers that are most in need of assistance. The implementation of the flow of restrictors only after the district has exhausted all means of offering financial assistance to our customers, and that expand the lien program to owner-occupied single-family residents to ensure that we recover unpaid water bills, and to ensure the cost of the flow restrictor are not subsidized. Provide adequate notices to customers prior to any installation, and to implement the flow restrictor only after the COVID emergency is lifted by the state. Slide number 5. So today, the board is being asked to vote to adopt this resolution. And if it's adopted by the board, we will begin engaging our stakeholders as well as agencies about a new collection strategy, and to get their input in support of the development of an implementation plan. And then that plan will be shared with the board in February at the CAP workshop. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. I would like to move the item.
I would like to second.
I just have a quick question, if I could, for Andrew
sure.
and Clifford. This is great. I think we're moving in the right direction. I would suspect after we adopt this, that this become a talking point for Marlaigne in Sacramento, so the legislature clearly understands what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yes, we put together, and I've worked with Marlaigne on a plan on how we're going to engage the state, as well as other entities and NGOs as well, and the cities and the counties.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think this has, I'm hopeful that actually this is something where we're leading the way on a solution that every water agency, at least every water agency in our state, is going to be grappling with, if not pretty much every state where water shutoff moratoriums have been put in place due to COVID. So any other questions or comments?
Marguerite, at the ARPA conference, this was one of the areas that they had some discussion as to how they're going to address the right to water. So we're definitely in the lead on this.
Other board members, comments or questions? Andy?
Thanks. I support moving forward with this mechanism that can avoid having a water shutoff. I have two reservations, one of which I think we've already begun to address, which is working to incorporate the flow restrictor charge into the CAP program, even though a CAP application may still be pending or have just been received around the time of the flow restrictor application. So I'm looking forward to hearing back clarification on that. I am assuming that we will be able, for qualifying customers, be able to incorporate that charge into a CAP scaled rate, so that when the customer has to pay that charge, that they'll only pay the CAP rate if they're really a CAP qualifying customer. That's important, I think. Another concern that I think we'll have to consider and monitor and hopefully adapt into the program is just how to make sure that we're doing the right outreach to make sure that people who are getting the flow restrictor treatment are getting the CAP rate. I am very concerned about people accruing the fixed charge month after month after month, and that can add up for people. So I think for people who are not CAP qualifying, that those are our rates and charges. But if they are CAP qualifying and the overwhelmment of the past due bill or the unfamiliarity with our billing and customer service practices aren't accessible enough, people could accrue those charges. And I'd like to minimize that pain as much as possible so that nobody's unnecessarily accruing the full fixed charge when they're not really getting the full water service that we're offering. So those are ongoing concerns, but I think that it's important that we move forward in a way that doesn't just go back to water service terminations. That doesn't do anybody any good. But we do have new considerations to address going forward. And I think the spirit of that is captured in the resolution. So with those comments, I'll vote for the resolution.
I got Doug and then Bill.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments. Again, to commend the staff for this solution. I think it goes a long ways in dealing with issues that we've been confronted with for the last several years. At the same time, I hear Andy's list of things that we still need to pay attention to. I would add to that, as we know, the charges put on our bill by other agencies, and I know we're doing work with Oakland. This is not an end-all solution to the problems we have. We need to keep working on them, paying attention to them until we get it right. But I think this is, I vote for this enthusiastically as an important step in that direction.
Director Patterson?
Yes, I'm very supportive of the flow restrictor approach. And I know education is essential in making this whole thing come together. And we should take advantage of all the support we have from outside, remembering both the MUD Act and 218. We can't give away things to people that the paying members of whom we represent are paying for things that they get no benefit from. So we need to be very, very careful from the legal approach as to what we are doing and how we're fashioning it. I'm sensitive to the fact that many of the people, and the bulk of them are in my ward, fall into this category. Some people are avoiding paying, and we need to be careful of that. I have a feeling that people I've talked to really want to pay their water bill. And as I said before, with the positive approach, especially that we got from Frank in bringing in outside resources to somehow supplement or help these folk pay their bill and get off board. The other part is the counseling will help them work this into their financial understandings of their own personal account. So I'm saying that to say we need to be very careful about anything that looks like we're burdening those persons who are paying full amount of their water bill with the expense of the persons who are not. And that we also make sure we plug the dike, otherwise we lose the water and the water goes to no avail. So I want to point those out as we go forward.
Thank you, Director Patterson. I did want to bring up one thing that I saw, which, I'm sorry, Lisa, I left you out. Go ahead.
Initially, I had some concerns with the trickle of water that staff was initially proposing. And I actually thought that was really a denial or deprivation of a right to water. But I think staff has sufficiently addressed those issues for me. So I will support.
Great. The one thing that I wanted to bring up that I saw was that, and perhaps Andrew, you can coordinate with the City of Oakland, is that they are doing $600 to $800 grants to people to help pay their utilities. I just saw a notice on Nextdoor this morning, actually, related to that. And I think their public information officer is who the contact person was. So either, you or Kelly or somebody can be in touch to try to make sure that, there's some way that we can communicate out to our behind delinquent customers that this is an opportunity to for them on that as well. Okay, I think we are ready for what I'm guessing will be a unanimous vote, but let's do the roll call.
All right, roll call vote on item 13. Directors Coleman.
Yes.
Katz.
Yes.
Lenny.
Yes.
McIntosh.
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes.
President Young.
Yes, and I just really want to thank Andrew and Clifford and everyone else who has put an oar in the water on this one. It is, as Director Lenny said, it's something, it's a big step forward in an issue that we still have to grapple with. Doesn't solve it all, but it's a big step in the right direction. And thank you for your diligence and care in moving this through the process with all of us.
Well, thank you, all the board members, for supporting this concept. And I know that there's a lot of work ahead of us, but we definitely are at the right starting point. So thank you again.
Great. Okay, that leads us to item 14 and kicking off with the coronavirus update. And I'm guessing, Eric Larsen, that this the coronavirus update is the portion of item 14 that you would like to comment on. Am I right about that?
I have to unmute Eric first.
Okay. Well, we'll hear from Dave before Eric goes, but
Maybe
Eric, is
if
that correct?
Yes, that's correct, President Young. Thank you.
Okay.
So Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, is going to share the state's most recent regional stay-at-home orders and their vaccine distribution plan, as well as our latest COVID statistics.
Okay, good afternoon, President Young and members of the board. I hope you're all doing well. I'm happy to give you an update. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm on slide 2, and as Clifford mentioned, in response to the rising infection rate in the state of California, the state health officer issued a revised stay-at-home order last Thursday, and this this new system works in parallel and in conjunction with the prior system related to the various restrictive tiers delineated by color. But there's some key differences. The first is that it's a regional approach. It's not administered at the county level. It also uses hospitalization capacities, not infection rates, to trigger going into this new framework. And specifically, the 5 regions that the state is divided into, each region has its own metric. The state calculates the available ICU capacity in each region. If it dips below 15%, that region goes into this more restrictive framework. So just for your reference, the Bay Area rate is still, I think I looked earlier today, I think it's still around 25%, one of the higher numbers in the state regions. Los Angeles region, Southern California, is about 10%, and the Central Valley is about 5%, which is alarming with the remaining ICU capacity. So as the board is probably also aware, several Bay Area counties, including Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco, and I think Marin today, certainly Santa Clara, each voluntarily entered this new framework, even though it's not formally triggered, both out of an abundance of caution and also knowing that they were probably heading that direction in the next week or so. Even though the ICU capacity is at 25% as a region, we know that the infection rate is still climbing, and it has been increasing for several weeks now, and the hospitalization rates typically lag by several weeks. So it's reasonable to assume that the hospital metrics the capacity at Bay Area hospitals will continue to go down in the next couple of weeks. So when not in this new framework, the prior system is still in play, and I'll get into that on the next slide. We've reviewed the new state order, the regional stay-at-home order for impacts on the district. One thing I would mention is that this was administered last Thursday. There have already been 2 revisions or clarifications issued by the state. It's only 4 or 5 days old, and many of them, many aspects of those clarifications have dealt with travel. The latest interpretation that I've seen from the state that Marlaine's staff forwarded to us earlier today, if I have this correct, travel is restricted, especially or explicitly, to those attempting to travel from a region that is already under this new restriction. So in other words, if you're in Los Angeles, you're not going to be able to book a hotel in Lake Tahoe. They won't accept your reservation under this new framework because Los Angeles is under this restriction already. Out-of-state travel is also, accepting reservations from out-of-state is also a restriction. But we track this every day. Things are subject to change. That being said, whether our counties go in or out of this new restrictive framework, there are no impacts directly on the district. There are certainly businesses that are impacted by this, by the new framework and the new restrictions. But by and large, the district's operations out in the field, construction and maintenance are going on as before. So this is, slide 3 is just here for reference. None of this is particularly relevant right now. I would note that Amador, actually a couple of hours ago, Amador did slip up into the purple most restrictive tier based on the latest update from the state. But this is moot right now. It might be relevant in mid-January when the infection rates hopefully decrease and the hospitalization rates improve. But this is just here for reference. This hopefully will be the system that the state will revert back to maybe in January. So Marlaigne mentioned a little bit of this earlier. The state has been slowly revealing its plans for distribution of a vaccine. We know some things. We don't know everything, but we do know a few things. We know that the state's going to be divided up into 6 regions, and the initial dosages from the Pfizer vaccine, 80,000 doses will be delivered to the Bay Area region. I think the United States still has to officially approve the vaccine. Once it does, vaccination could begin next week. That would vaccinate 40,000 people in the Bay Area. Individuals need 2 doses of this particular vaccine. And as has been discussed, the way the state has designed its plan, the first priority are going to be given to healthcare workers, various hospitals, various places where there is a workers in direct harm's way. Those will be among the first to be vaccinated. No members of the general public. Shortly thereafter, hopefully in January, in what the state is presently calling Phase 1B, although the state's terminology is certainly subject to change. But we do know that in general, essential workers, as is defined by the state, which includes utility workers, will be part of the next phase of vaccinations, which could begin in January. We are reviewing the state plan as it's updated. We have thought about the employees that would be first to be vaccinated. And Clifford and I have talked about this. The frontline workers, the workers that are unable to telecommute or work remotely would be among the first that we would put into that first group to be vaccinated. It's about 2/3 of the workforce. That's the tentative plan right now. We'll also look
Dave, I have a question. This is John on that issue. Let's assume those employees of ours who fall into that category choose not to get the vaccine. What does that mean, and what does that mean for them returning to work?
So that's a discussion we're having right now. So as the state's putting together their plan, we're putting together our plan. That's one of the issues that's being contemplated among a number of other HR-related issues that's being looked into right now.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need to notify the Alameda, Contra Costa, and Berkeley health jurisdictions to identify how many residents in those health jurisdictions are essential utility workers that are at increased risk of exposure? Do we have our own inventory to be able to communicate to the health department so that they're in line as these plans are being developed?
Yeah, yes, Director Katz. We have developed an initial list of employees that would be essentially, as I said, our field workers who are out in the field working that cannot telecommute would be among the first that we would identify for our local health departments. That number is about 1,300. The other, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, just making sure that we are aware that they need to make plans because they're reporting to the state. So they're probably expecting us to be notifying them of that expectation.
Yeah, we are expecting to be formally asked for a number at any time. So we're preparing that number and that group of employees. The other aspect I would say is that the Human Resources Department, Laura Costa staff are researching what various health providers how they would administer the vaccine. I do know as a Kaiser member that Kaiser would not charge its members to be vaccinated. I think Laura's folks are checking in with the other health plan providers to see exactly what would happen, but I do know that Kaiser is essentially saying that they will do it for free to members. The last point here, even after vaccinations begin, we can all expect that all of our safety measures, our PPE, our mask wearing, our social distancing, our site-specific safety plans, everything that we've worked so hard to maintain over the past 8 months will stay in place for the foreseeable future. Just because vaccinations start and just because an individual employee may be vaccinated, everybody's going to be wearing a face covering for the foreseeable future. Too early to let our guard down. So district operations remain stable, as I mentioned, even though there's been a lot of attention with these latest orders from the state. We don't see a big impact on district operations. So it's steady as it goes here. We have done our best to prepare for the higher infection rates that the district is seeing. I'll give you some data on that in a moment. And as the infection rate increases, we adapt on our side by putting more resources behind all of the effort needed to do the contact tracing and compliance with all the various regulations that are related to contact tracing. So as the rate increases, we make changes on our side to make sure that we can handle the caseload. So these slides were updated Friday morning, and I'm showing here 26 employee positives. That number now is 31. and 6 contractors to date. 18 employees, not 13, have tested positive in the last 2 months, and we're essentially averaging 1 a day in the past week. So,
How many have returned to work, Dave?
I'm sorry, Director Mellon?
This is 31 total, and how many have returned to work?
So I believe that was the subject of Ms. Acosta's memo last week. So of the 31 that we've recorded, and 7 have basically been in play in the last week. So let's say the first 25 or so, which have already recovered, they've all returned to work. The 7 in play right now are in various stages of isolation.
Anybody hospitalized?
Not that I know of.
Okay, thank you. Excuse my interruption.
No problem. Oh, and then just one aspect here. In terms of our plan for keeping our workforce safe, both now and in the past, as we have been doing, and then looking forward, as we all acknowledge that the pandemic is in an intensifying phase right now. The cornerstone of our safety plan is what I mentioned earlier, the site-specific plans, the self-checklist that employees administer to themselves before they enter the workplace, the social distancing, the face coverings, all of these measures we've put in place. That's the cornerstone of our effort to keep people safe. And we've shown that employee transmission at work is very, very rare. So we know that it works, but we also know that the pandemic is intensifying. So a couple things we've implemented over the past few weeks. One thing is that our self-checklist, which I just mentioned, is a little bit more conservative than it was a month ago. And by conservative, I mean it's harder to get in the front door. So, and that goes over and above the county's suggested self-checklist. We have now broadened one of the questions so that if an employee is symptomatic or exhibiting COVID-like symptoms, even if they don't have a confirmed positive test, they are unable to enter a district work site. In addition to that, if they're living with somebody in their household who is exhibiting COVID-consistent symptoms, they also cannot enter the workplace. That goes over and above what the county requires, and it's reflective of our effort to increasingly try to keep our employees safe and protected. Additionally, we have taken additional steps to protect our operators. In the past week or so, we've implemented several additional layers of protection to protect our distribution operators here in the administrative building. And we are otherwise, a big aspect of our program, it doesn't sound very exciting, but it's the continual training and reminders. People are getting tired, and it's our job to make sure that they hang in there, they remember the rules, and they don't let their guard down. So training is a big part of our plan as well.
Dave,
Yes.
I mean, whenever I get the reports in my inbox, I can't recall any, I don't think, any reports that said, at least recently, that said that anybody else had needed to isolate as a result of the positive testing of an employee. I think I'm saying that right. So that we're not finding ourselves in the situation where we're creating an opportunity for exposure from one of our employees to another one. Do we have any?
Yeah, you are correct. We have not had an employee-to-employee transmission recently, and by recently I mean since last summer. Now, we do routinely quarantine many employees with close contact to somebody who is symptomatic or COVID positive. That is relatively routine, and you see those in the email updates that we send out as we provide the updates. But I do not think we have a confirmed employee-to-employee transmission, confirmed positives that I'm aware of. Now, of course, the moment I say that, I'm sure,
well, let's hope not.
Yeah.
Let's hope not.
But no, I think that is the point, Director Young, is that our measures that we have in place, I think we have the track record showing that it's pretty darn effective.
Yeah, for sure. Very much appreciated. Would hate to see us in the news for that.
Right. and not to belabor the point, but just for completeness, there's several with new state law and OSHA regulations. If you do have many positives at a work site, additional administrative reporting and countermeasures need to be performed by the employer, and we haven't gotten there yet. A so-called outbreak. So on the final slide here, on the top is a graphic you've seen before. This is the blue graphic that shows the average number of hours that an employee cannot make a contribution because of some COVID-related reason. We track this. It's been going up, and we have the last pay period shown here through November 22nd. The pay period that ended last weekend and the one that we're in right now, based on what I know, I'm sure these blue bars will continue to increase, but overall, showing at about 25 hours a day of lost time, it shows you that the impact on the district is relatively small. But of course, as we've been saying, it's much more of a impact on employees that we've been focused on here in the past several months. The lower graphic shows when those positives were recorded by the district, and the December number is out of date. It was through last Friday morning. I believe that should be a 6 now in through December. Today's the 8th, so we're almost at all of November, and we're only 8 days into the month. So December's going to be intense, and we know that. Earlier today, I think we heard Mr. Larsen quote a statistic that about 10% of the workforce has used all of their COVID-related leave, their FFCRA leave, and I would also mention supplement that statistic with about 25% of employees have used some. So those aren't good numbers, but I would say that since we've been doing this for 8 months or so, 8 months plus, although those are not good numbers, I think they're manageable numbers, and they're relatively low considering how long this has gone on for. We're prepared for more of a storm in the month of December as this goes on, and we will weather it, and we will report back updates as needed. Thank you.
Dave?
Thank you, Dave. Frank? We also, we have Eric Larsen on deck for public comment. Do you want to
very
ask
quick.
Okay.
Dave, in the future, when you do the slide on the number of cases, I find it a little offsetting. So could you please include what we have as the folks that have returned to work? Because I think that provides us some balance with the presentation. It makes, I worry when I see 31 or something, and I'm thinking we still got 31 people out of work. And I would like to know that, okay, we had this many cases, need that data, but if you could do that. And that was the only thing I wanted to say, Marguerite.
Okay, that's great. Eric?
Thank you, President Young, and thank you, Mr. Briggs, for your thorough report, and General Manager Chan. As management and frontline staff work diligently to continue to provide safe working conditions during this COVID pandemic, we are alarmed at the increase in COVID cases in the Bay Area, and we're seeing the Bay Area and the state and Bay Area counties going rapidly into a more strict lockdown and shelter-in-place orders as hospital beds and in ICU units fall below 15% availability. I have a question. At what point do we provide better protection for our frontline critical infrastructure workers to assure that we're kept safe and continue to operate and maintain our system? Specifically, when do we return to a shelter-in-place reserve rotation? When the number of cases at the district exceed a certain number? When the number of available beds at hospitals exceeds a certain number? When we see a greater number of workplace outbreaks? Or do we just wait for state and county orders to direct us to do so? This is going to be a long, hard winter, and it hasn't even begun yet. December 21st is the first day of winter, and I don't think these cases are going to plateau in January. I'm really quite alarmed and frankly scared about the trajectory that things are currently going for a person who has to report to work every day. Your next meeting is not scheduled for another month. I believe the second director's meeting has been canceled in December, so your next meeting is not until the second week in January. I'm sure you'll be getting updates, and I'm sure that you're all very concerned. But we're concerned about the rate at which the COVID situation is escalating and the current trajectory in the workplace. As Mr. Briggs noted, we're seeing notifications of 2 a day of new cases in the workplace. We need testing available. There should be a routine testing program here at the district. Testing should be more available. We need to know what the impacts of travel restrictions are going to be on our workforce. What plans are in place for future more strict shelter-in-place orders or other actionable events that should trigger a reserve rotation protective of our frontline essential workers who maintain and operate critical infrastructure, who report every day and often work in crews and do not have work from home options. We need employees to be notified when they have been in contact with other COVID positive individuals greater than the 48-hour required by the county health orders before the onset of symptoms, so that they can take appropriate precautionary measures and be isolated so that we don't have a workplace outbreak. Thank you again to the work that management is doing, Mr. Briggs and Clifford Chen and everybody else involved in these difficult problems. It's been, I know, an administrative nightmare to comply with AB 685, which is requiring a 45-day look back at all the locations visited by COVID-19 positive individuals, but not their actual contacts, which is what we actually need. A real contact tracing program that doesn't simply rely on somebody's memory. I think the district should be considering potentially adopting the new phone application being rolled out by the state of California so that people can be notified if they have been in close contact with another COVID positive individual, so that people can take appropriate measures to make sure that they don't infect their families or one another in the workplace. Thank you.
Eric, are you, thank you for your comments. And Eric, Clifford, and Dave, are these topics getting discussed in the EOT or other meetings that are happening to talk about when to trigger more restrictive practices?
Yes, we're looking at all of these, and even the application. I think the last thing that Eric mentioned to me, we just heard about this the other day, and we're looking into that application as well and seeing if it will work for East Bay MUD. So everything that Eric is bringing up, we have either discussed with the unions or have discussed separately within management on how we would deal with these.
And my presumption is that you will adaptively manage to that without the need for board direction between now and our first meeting in January. And if there is a need for board direction, you will call a special meeting.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dave on the coronavirus update?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Derry Moten, Manager of Employee and Organizational Development, will give you our Racial Equity and Justice and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan update.
You're muted, Derry. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, President Young and board members. We're going to provide for you the latest status on where we are in terms of our progress around racial equity and justice and the development of our diversity inclusion strategic plan. So to begin with, we are currently looking at a variety of things, and today, sorry, trying to get my slide advanced.
Try your arrows on your keyboard, Derry.
Yes.
You want to go ahead? Give us one moment.
Okay. Not advancing for me here, sorry.
Are your keyboard arrows working for you?
No.
Okay, so can you check, Janetta, can you control and navigate for him? Okay.
So a couple of things that we'll be talking about today is we've been engaged in some external discussions around diversity, equity, inclusion with a couple of organizations, specifically KUA and with Baywork. We're going to talk about racial equity and justice updates on the project, and also our project updates around diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan. We'll review kind of where we are schedule-wise and how we're progressing, and then we'll talk about next steps for the project. So to begin the discussion with how we're working with external organizations in terms of discussions around planning around diversity, equity, inclusion, we've been talking specifically, are part of the working group from KUA with their latest work group on community, on diversity, inclusion overall. And what the main conversations in that discussion have been around is how each of the agencies are working on specific projects and sharing kind of best practices that people have been experiencing so far. One of the two outcomes that the group is currently after is, number one, development of some policy principles, which KUA itself will potentially adopt, and that they would then allow other agencies to look at and determine how other agencies would look to work with those. Right now, the dialogue have been centered around four primary areas in terms of looking at policy. Number one is looking at how organizations create policy specifically around creating inclusive environments. Number two has been working on the increase in diversity, representation, and inclusion, and overall a sense of belonging at all levels of organizations. The third area is about creating equitable benefit for all communities, which gets into a combination of items around environmental justice, accessibility and affordability of water, which we just heard we're organizationally taking steps around based on Andrew Lee's presentation earlier. Looking at environmental restoration and land usage, access to watershed lands to diverse communities, and then finally mitigation of impacts of climate change. And then the fourth area is then looking at methods for accountability and methods for metrics, which are things that we'll be working with the Winters Group as we're advancing our internal dialogue here. With Baywork recently hosted at their training buffet, which is a region-wide training initiative. They actually hosted a panel on racial equity in the industry. We were able to participate with 5 other agencies: SFPUC, San Jose Water, Valley Water, and Contra Costa Water, with information about what each of us are doing in terms of these efforts, and really initiate some dialogue among each agency in again, how we can both look at similar pathways, but also look at unique things that each of us are looking at in terms of development of diversity and equity inclusion practices beyond traditional HR. And in general, most of the conversations have been centered around how we move beyond just diversity inclusion being focused on human resources, but then also looking at community impacts and engagement, looking specifically at contracting processes and looking at how we expand and work in kind of local partnership around workforce development in different ways. Internally, we've been continuing to also work with our diversity committee. We had temporarily postponed meetings of the diversity committee while we were going through the initial processes of doing data collection for the diversity inclusion strategic plan. We recently brought that group back together with some direction from the board in terms of looking at how we expand the definitions that we're using around diversity to be not just about race and gender, but also looking at diverse ways of thinking. We took our diversity committee and we've expanded the diversity committee to not only include all of our affinity groups, but we've also added several other existing groups into the dialogue around diversity, which is our committee, our district advocates, our sustainability committee, and Toastmasters as one of our leadership groups that are involved in employee development here overall. So each one of these groups have provided additional individuals to become part of the diversity committee. So we're looking at how can we continue to assemble a group for the diversity committee that will be able to again represent both diversity and inclusion factors within the district. And as we break further into working groups as part of the strategic plan development, we're looking for the group of our diversity committee to continue to be involved and engaged as we're moving forward. So for racial equity and justice, we have at the point where we've taken strategy 1 and strategy 6 and are moving towards implementation. We are doing in the development of implementation plans, which right now looks like a couple of different things. Specifically, we're looking at how we do training for staff in specific areas, also policy and procedure development, specifically around the items related to our listening sessions and ongoing listening beyond just this moment, and putting together our strategies for having ongoing listening processes. And then on strategy 6, which is specifically looking at how we deal with racism from customers, the team has actually put together a plan. We are currently working on some of those details about implementation of that, which includes both training for internal staff, but also external training for customers on identification of employees and how to determine how we actually also work with law enforcement to make sure that we have proper protocols that if an employee is engaged by the community or a customer with racist or bias issues, that both the employees and the rest of our response team are prepared to be able to work through the processes there. Second thing for both of these groups is then working on benchmarks and metrics in terms of how we measure this and what types of specific outcomes we're expecting to receive from those. We've launched strategy 7 and 8, which deals with number 1, strategy 7 about our internal security protocols, which has been expanded. Our initial look was specifically at how we deal with individuals or organizations that enter our headquarters offices, but we've expanded that to also look at how that plays out in watershed areas, specifically with, again, customers or individuals coming into those spaces and how we interact with them from a local security perspective. Then in strategy 8, the dialogue has been had around how we're interacting specifically with both our partnered law enforcement agencies and then law enforcement agencies that are located in areas where we have facilities or we're doing business. So they've broken it into both groups and looking at protocols for dialogue and engagement with both groups. So far, the conversations have been really strong in terms of developing a strong process for actually engaging in the dialogues we want to have and leveraging off the existing conversations that our staff have already been able to have with some of our partnered agencies. The task force is right now developing more of their formal action plans, which have included very good information that we've received from OGC and from Water and Natural Resources and from our internal security department. They've had great dialogue and they really have come up with some good areas, good methods and tactics for moving forward, which we'll hear more about as we finalize their plans. So in terms of our diversity, equity, inclusion strategic plan, we've continued with core team and SMT training. Phase 2 of our training has been our racial equity training, which includes 3 courses. The course 1 is creating the foundation for racial equity, which both our core team and our SMT have completed. The second course is elevating understanding and identifying opportunities to implement racial equity, which our core team has completed and will be scheduling our SMT to complete in January. And then the third course is developing a racial equity plan, which is where the consultant will actually walk us through our actual strategic plan development, with our core team and SMT both being well-versed in issues not just around diversity and inclusion, but specifically the area of equity and what that looks like in terms of understanding it from both the internal and external perspectives. So that will take place in the month of February. So we're working with the consultant for scheduling right now. And again, the core team completed course 2 on December 1st and 2nd. And again, the rest of the SMT will complete course 2 in the month of January. I think we went, yep, there we go. So currently on project schedule, again, we've continued to work on phase 1 and phase 2 items in terms of all 4 of those strategies are in process and moving forward. For phase 2, we are to the point of really putting the implementation plan together. Phase 3 will have us actually working on specific projects around engaging employees in our external community, reviewing district processes and practices, and reviewing policies and procedures. Each of those 3 will be items that we'll be working directly with the consultant, the Winters Group, and their sub-consultant, OG, Racial Equity, as we're moving into the month of February. So each of those will become projects that we will work on with the vendor in order to kind of advance the process here. And when it comes to training and dialogue, we are doing some work right now on the redevelopment of some of our internal training and looking at additional training options based on the recommendations we've received from the Winters Group when they should be presenting some of that data to us preliminarily in the month of January. And then finally, we're looking at the diversity inclusion strategic plan being developed from now, as we're now working on racial equity information, and then in through March, when we should be complete with our first phases of the dialogue around development of the plan, which come from phase 3 of the training. So our next steps is, again, we're going to continue participation with KUA for diversity, equity, inclusion, their committee. That committee did meet earlier today. They have finalizing the specific policy principles which they're going to be recommending to the KUA board. We're going to continue implementation of our recommendations for strategies 1 and 6. Next slide. And again, we're continuing to review our internal security engagement policies and procedures and engaging with dialogues with the law enforcement partners as part of strategies 7 and 8, as we mentioned. And then again, we'll be continuing the core team and SMT training on racial equity. And then finally, we'll begin the development of the strategic plan for the diversity, equity, inclusion with the Winters Group, which again will happen as we're approaching the months of February and March. So at this point, open up to any questions from the board.
Any questions from board members?
Marguerite? Hi.
Go ahead.
I don't have any questions. I just like to ask my standard, well, I do have a question, my standard question, and that is, Derry, do you need anything from the board?
Right now, no. We are evaluating a couple of things, and that is, in addition to kind of the general work we're doing, we're looking at our internal approaches to, as I mentioned, we're kind of looking at with the introduction of racial equity into the dialogue, which is something we hadn't fully been really talking about with this introduction that we're kind of both getting from the Winters Group and engaging with KUA and other agencies, we are looking at this from the perspective of internal HR when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to selection and promotion. We're also looking at it from the vantage point of thinking about our overall community engagement and what that looks like. So I think this dialogue is expanding in terms of our traditional view of diversity inclusion, and then what that looks like as we ourselves continue to evolve in our organizational perspective about what this means and what this work is addressed to doing. So as we're doing that, we are looking at, how do we best look at our diversity inclusion office, and how do we best consider ways that we can maximize some of our work, especially when it comes to things like our approaches to workforce development. We have good programs that we're continuing to do, but how do we continue to take those programs and anchor them to a more strategic overall effort, which again becomes part of this overall process. So I think things like those are things that we're considering right now and we're looking at. And as we continue the process, I think we will have probably more clarity on if there are additional things that we do need.
Okay. And lastly, so the Winters Group, it's ongoing, obviously, but at what point do you think the board will be privy to their findings, their report?
We're pushing them to have that data for either the January or February meeting of the board.
All right.
So
okay.
That's our push right now. They actually are closed for the month of December, and so
Sure.
Zoom in January we'll have a better picture on that.
Okay, wonderful. I think we're all looking forward to that.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Thank you, Director McIntosh. And thank you, Derry and the team working on this again for just really moving it along. It's great to see. Not seeing any, well, I can't see anybody because everybody has their video off, which is fine because it's making my internet connection more stable. We move on now to reports and director comments. The minutes from the November 24th Finance and Administration Committee are included in the packet. And folks should have received, the write-ups from our workshop that was held then as well. Let's get reports from items not covered earlier in the day from our planning committee and the legislative
Marguerite,
HR committee. So first for planning, Director Linney.
Wait, I have a question under the monthly report for Clifford, if I could, real quick. Page 196, 197, it's on our water sales.
Oh, I forgot. We skipped monthly report. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. My question is, I know that we have generated how much it's talking about on 196 and 197, what our water sales are and stuff. Is that money that has been booked, i.e. collected, or is that money that is out there in terms of, because we don't know, there's a lot of payments aren't being made and so on, or maybe made in partial, not total authority? Is that money that we've actually collected or we will be anticipating to collect?
Yeah, what you're seeing in that graph is what's been billed, and I don't have the number on what's been collected. I can find out, but there is a certain portion that hasn't been, and
yeah, there always is. I know that. I just didn't know if it was higher, because I suspect some people are maybe trying to also make an effort and maybe not making payments in full as well. Just as a future memo, that's all I need.
Okay, and we've seen that number creep up a little bit, but it's about the same that we've shared the last time when we were talking about the flow restrictors.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's my question.
And while we're on the monthly report, are there any other questions with the monthly report? Okay. I would like to add, given that this is the last board meeting for the year, I do want to thank the board, the senior management team, and all the employees for managing through this very challenging year. And if I don't see or talk to you next year, I wish you all a happy holiday, happy new year. And I hope, as Joey said earlier, much better 2021. And not that we can't handle another challenge, but I'm also hoping for some rain.
From your mouth to the ears of God.
I'm sure 2021 will be
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everyone.
I know. Tom Stianestra says December 19th it's going to start pouring. I don't know where he got.
Now, is that pouring
Summer's almanac.
in Philly or here?
My internet connection is really bad right now. Doug, are you able to take over the rest of the meeting?
Sure. I'll give my report on the planning committee. We met this morning at 9 o'clock. We had 4 items. The first one was the one that you also saw as part of the broader board meeting on the Orinda water treatment plant update. Second one was the wastewater pretreatment and pollution prevention programs update, where we just got updates on some of the pretreatment issues, as well as some of the issues around pollution prevention programs that we have. We also had a presentation on the facility landscape maintenance update. This is a source of some amount of discussion, maybe even tension between management and employees wanting to balance our seasonal needs for maintenance, landscape maintenance, with the needs of when they come, and that happy to report at least that management and labor has been having meetings and discussion about this, and while not seeing perhaps entirely eye to eye, some plan for the future to evaluate, have continuous evaluation on that. And then finally, we reviewed update on policy 4.28, which is the cyber security, which we voted on in our earlier in today's meeting as part of the consent calendar. John, you want to give a report on?
Sure. I'll be real quick. We had our Ledge HR committee meeting at 10 a.m. today. Everybody was in attendance. We had 2 items, determinations. One was already addressed in the general board of item 11, which is our state legislative initiatives for the 2021 year. And then Beverly Johnson gave a very good contract equity program report for fiscal year 2020 as well.
Great, thank you, John. Any other board director comments?
If I could, just real quick, I normally don't do this because I do them written, but I want to call out a staff member. Last week, I was on a call as a panelist for the Water Reuse NorCal chapter meeting on recycled water. And Ben Glickstein did a phenomenal job pulling together the information I needed and additional questions if in the event they were asked. So I would be fully prepared. So I'd like to give kudos to Ben and all the people he worked with to make that happen.
All right, thank you, John. Frank.
Likewise, from the time I was asked if I would be a speaker on the diversity issue for Aqua, to the time that they were doing the videotaping was like 2 days. And when I went to Clifford and Kelly and said, help, the whole team pulled together a nice, good set of facts and information for me, so that I just wasn't winging it. And I've already gotten back some reports saying, wow, you really know what you're talking about. And so what I really want to say is staff really knows what I'm talking about. And I thank them very, very much.
Anyone else? Any other director comments? Our last board meeting of the year. Bill, go ahead.
I'd just like to echo some of what has been said from many different members around this group, to the East Bay Mud family, that is all of the family, I want to give my heartfelt Christmas and New Year's greetings and congratulate them on a great year. I hope everybody will remain safe, take all the precautions, adhere to the protocols, and come back safe the first of the year so we can continue on this pilgrimage of greatness. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I was hoping you'd have some of the last word maybe for today. You're so good at that. All right, with that, then I will adjourn today's meeting. Do have a safe Christmas and holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.